Elijah Morgan rode his chestnut gelding along the scorched borderlands of West Texas, the acrid smell of ash still hanging in the air 3 days after the raid. The summer of 1875 had been cruel to everyone in these parts, settlers and natives alike, but what he witnessed at the small Comanche encampment left him hollow inside. Bodies lay scattered, some already buried by survivors who had since moved on, others left to the mercy of vultures circling overhead. He dismounted, his boots crunching on the blackened earth. 2 years as a Texas Ranger hadn't prepared him for this, not after losing Sarah and their unborn child to fever last winter. That pain, still cut fresh, made him reckless in his patrols, volunteering for the assignments no one else wanted. The captain had noticed, suggested he take time, but time alone with his thoughts was the last thing Elijah needed. A soft whimper caught his attention. Elijah's hand moved instinctively to his Colt. "Who's there?" he called, voice rough from disuse. Nothing but the wind answered, carrying another pained sound. Behind the charred remains of a teepee, he found her. She was curled into herself, one side of her face and body badly burned, her traditional dress blackened and torn. Her dark eyes, wide with fear, watched him approach. She couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. "I ain't gonna hurt you," Elijah said, holstering his weapon and raising his hands. "I'm not with the men who did this." The young woman said nothing, only trembled as she tried to back away, her movements restricted by pain. Elijah noticed a crude bandage around her leg, soaked through with blood. "My name's Elijah Morgan. I'm a ranger," he said, tapping the star pinned to his vest. "I can help you if you'll let me." Her eyes darted past him, looking for others, then back to his face, searching for deceit. She spoke finally, her voice hoarse. "They will come back. They always come back." Her English surprised him, though he shouldn't have assumed. Many Comanche traded with settlers, learned their language. Who did this?" Elijah asked, crouching down but keeping his distance. "White men, soldiers, not like you." She winced as she shifted. "They took the others, the young ones, the children." Elijah's jaw tightened. Rogue militia groups had been causing trouble along the border, using the government's relocation orders as an excuse for violence and worse. Captain Williams had warned about them, but the Rangers were stretched thin across the territory. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Numu? I am called Nashoba." She paused. "It means wolf." "You need a doctor, Nashoba," Elijah said. "The nearest town's half a day's ride." "Can you travel?" She nodded once, determination hardening her features despite the pain. "I will not die here. Not like this." As Elijah helped her onto his horse, mindful of her burns, he noticed a wedding band and decorative beadwork around her wrist. "Your husband?" he asked. Nashoba's face went blank, her emotions disappearing behind a carefully constructed wall. "Dead. 2 summers now. Before we came to this place." She looked around at the destruction. "My new husband's camp. He is dead too, 2 days." Elijah nodded, understanding loss in a way few others could. "I'm sorry," he said simply, and meant it. As they rode toward the town of Redemption Springs, Elijah couldn't help but feel the weight of her silence behind him. 2 marriages by her age, 2 husbands dead, the second likely killed before her eyes as she burned. Some pain went beyond words. He knew that truth better than most. "The doctor there, Reynolds, he's a good man," Elijah said, breaking the silence as they crossed the open plain. "Patched me up more times than I care to count." Nashoba didn't respond, but her grip around his waist tightened slightly as the horse navigated a steep embankment. Physical contact with another person felt foreign to Elijah after months of isolation. Sarah's absence had left a void he'd filled with work and whiskey. "Townfolk might stare," he warned. "Not many Comanche come through, and those that do don't usually stay long." "I know how white people look at my kind," she said flatly. "I do not care if they stare. I only want medicine for pain. Then I go find my people." Elijah frowned. "The nearest Comanche settlement is over 100 miles north. You won't make it alone, not injured like this." "Then I die trying," she said with quiet determination. "Better than waiting for the soldiers to return." The sun dipped low on the horizon as Redemption Springs came into view, a collection of wooden buildings straddling the stagecoach route between El Paso and San Antonio. A church steeple rose above the dusty main street, alongside the false fronts of the general store, saloon, and hotel. As they rode in, heads turned, conversations halted. Elijah felt Nashoba stiffen against his back. Just keep your eyes forward, he murmured. We'll be at the doctor's in a minute. Sheriff Thomas Blackwood emerged from his office, hand resting casually on his holstered gun. Morgan, he called, eyeing Neshoba with suspicion. Didn't expect to see you back so soon, or with company. Found her at a raided camp south of here, Elijah replied. She needs medical attention. You know how folks feel about bringing her kind into town, Blackwood said, lowering his voice as he approached, especially with what happened to the Webster farm last month. She's injured and alone, Sheriff. Her people were attacked, likely by the same militia we've been hearing about. Blackwood's expression softened slightly. Doc Reynolds is out at the Carson place. Their boy took ill this morning. Mrs. Reynolds might be able to help, though. Elijah nodded his thanks and guided his horse toward the small house behind the doctor's office. Every step of the way, he felt the town's eyes burning into them, some curious, others hostile. Neshoba kept her head high despite her injuries, dignity intact even as whispers followed them down the street. He knew then that getting her healed would be the easy part. What came after would test them both in ways neither could imagine. Mrs. Abigail Reynolds worked with quiet efficiency, cleaning Neshoba's burns with a gentleness that belied her no-nonsense demeanor. The small back room of the doctor's residence smelled of carbolic acid and herbs, the lamplight casting long shadows across the walls. These burns need daily tending, she said, wrapping fresh bandages around Neshoba's arm. Infection's the real danger now. You're lucky Mr. Morgan found you when he did. Neshoba remained silent, her face a mask of stoic endurance. Only the occasional tightening around her eyes revealed the pain she felt. Elijah leaned against the doorframe, hat in hand. How long until she can travel? Mrs. Reynolds shot him a disapproving look. Travel? She shouldn't be moved for at least 2 weeks, preferably longer. That leg wound needs watching too. Looks like a bullet grazed her. I must find my people, Neshoba insisted, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. Cannot stay here. You'll find your death instead, young lady, Mrs. Reynolds replied firmly. Now, I've mixed a tincture for the pain. Take it every 6 hours, no more. After Mrs. Reynolds left to prepare a bed, Elijah approached Neshoba. You heard her. You can't travel. Then where do I go? Neshoba asked, a rare vulnerability breaking through her composure. Your town does not want me here. Elijah ran a hand through his hair, considering their limited options. The hotel wouldn't take her. The boarding house was equally unlikely. The church might offer sanctuary, but Reverend Porter's charity rarely extended to natives. I have a place, he said finally. Small cabin just outside town. Been empty since... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. It's yours until you're healed. Suspicion clouded her features. Why would you help me? It was a fair question, one Elijah had been asking himself since finding her among the ashes. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was all he could offer for now. The next morning, they slipped out of town before most residents were awake. Elijah's cabin sat nestled among cottonwood trees a mile from Redemption Springs, close enough for necessities, but far enough for privacy. It was a modest structure, one room with a stone fireplace, a small table with 2 chairs, a bed in the corner, and a few shelves lined with books and supplies. It ain't much, he said as he helped Neshoba inside, but it'll keep you safe while you heal. Neshoba took in the sparse furnishings, her gaze lingering on a woman's shawl draped over a chair and a pair of small knitted baby booties on the mantel. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Your wife, she said softly, not a question. Elijah nodded, turning away to hide the grief that still ambushed him at unexpected moments. I'll take the floor. Bed's yours. He busied himself lighting the stove. Need to head into town for supplies. You need anything specific? No. Neshoba sat carefully on the edge of the bed. You have already done too much. Ain't done nearly enough, he muttered, more to himself than to her. The following days established an uneasy routine. Elijah would rise before dawn, leave food and water within Neshoba's reach, then ride into town for his ranger duties. He'd return in the evening to find her sitting outside, regardless of Mrs. Reynolds's instructions to rest, her face turned toward the distant mountains. On the 5th day, he returned to find her attempting to wash clothes in the small creek behind the cabin, her bandaged arm held awkwardly against her body. What are you doing? He demanded, dismounting quickly. You'll tear open those wounds. I will not be useless, she said firmly, straightening despite her obvious pain. You give shelter, food. I must give something in return. Elijah shook his head. That ain't how this works. You're here to heal, not work yourself to death. In my tribe, all must contribute, even the sick if they can. Her dark eyes challenged him. I am not your burden to carry. You're not a burden, he insisted, gentler now. You're a person who needs help. There's a difference. Something shifted in her expression, surprise perhaps at being seen as more than her circumstances. She nodded once and allowed him to help her back to the cabin. That evening, as they ate a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Neshoba broke their usual silence. The small shoes on your shelf, for your child? Elijah's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. No one in town dared mention Sarah's pregnancy anymore. Yes, he said after a moment. Would have been born in spring. Neshoba nodded, understanding in her eyes. My first husband and I, we tried for children. None came. She touched her scarred face unconsciously. Now, perhaps it is better this way. Don't say that, Elijah said, more sharply than he intended. The thought of Neshoba believing her worth was diminished by her scars bothered him deeply. Scars don't change who you are, don't they? She gave a bitter smile. My people believe in balance. Perhaps this is payment for some wrong I have done. That's not how the world works, Elijah said, pushing his plate away. Bad things happen to good people all the time. There's no reason to it, no cosmic ledger being balanced. Then why help me? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. If not for balance, to ease your own pain by easing mine? The question hit too close to the truth. Elijah stood abruptly. Getting late. Should turn in. That night, as he lay on his bedroll near the fireplace, listening to Neshoba's even breathing from the bed, Elijah confronted uncomfortable truths. Was he helping her to salve his own guilt? To fill the void Sarah and their child had left behind? Or was there something more? A connection he hadn't felt with another soul since losing his family. A week passed. Neshoba's physical healing progressed faster than Mrs. Reynolds had predicted. The Comanche were known for their resilience, and Neshoba embodied that strength. Her emotional walls, however, remained firmly in place, until the nightmare. Elijah woke to her cries, thrashing against invisible enemies in the darkness. He approached cautiously, knowing the danger of waking someone from such terror too suddenly. Neshoba, he called softly, you're safe. It's just a dream. Her eyes flew open, wild with fear. Without thinking, he took her hand. You're in my cabin in Redemption Springs. You're safe. Recognition slowly dawned in her eyes, followed by shame at her vulnerability. She pulled her hand away. I am sorry. Don't be, he said, remaining at her bedside. I get them too. After Sarah died, sometimes I'd wake up thinking she was still beside me. In the pale moonlight filtering through the window, Neshoba studied him. The pain never leaves. It changes, he admitted. Becomes something you carry rather than something that carries you. He offered a sad smile. Most days, anyway. She nodded, understanding passing between them, deeper than words could express. For the first time since finding her, Elijah felt a connection that went beyond duty or compassion, a recognition of shared suffering and the quiet strength it took to endure. As he returned to his bedroll, Neshoba's voice followed him through the darkness. Thank you, Elijah Morgan, not just for the shelter. It was the first time she'd used his name. Word spread quickly in small towns. By the end of the second week, Elijah could feel the change in how people regarded him. Sideways glances, conversations that halted when he entered the general store, whispers that followed him down the street. Redemption Springs had tolerated his grief. They would not tolerate his harboring a Comanche woman. Sheriff Blackwood cornered him outside the post office. People are talking, Morgan. Let them talk, Elijah replied, securing his saddlebags. She'll be gone soon enough. It ain't just idle gossip this time. Blackwood lowered his voice. Militia's been spotted 20 miles south. Same ones likely responsible for the raid on her camp. Elijah's hands stilled. How many? Dozen, maybe more. Calling themselves the Texas Preservation Society. Blackwood spat into the dust. Nothing but murderers using the territory disputes as an excuse. Any idea where they're headed? North, following Comanche trails. The sheriff gave him a pointed look. Word gets to them about a survivor staying with a ranger. Might draw unwanted attention our way. The warning was clear. Elijah nodded. Appreciate the information, Sheriff. That evening, Elijah returned to the cabin earlier than usual, mind heavy with decisions that needed making. He found Neshoba sitting on the porch steps, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, shining in the late afternoon sun. For a moment he simply watched her, the way she held herself with quiet dignity despite everything she'd endured. "You're back early," she observed without turning. "How did you know it was me?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You have a distinctive way of riding, heavy on the left stirrup." Elijah dismounted, impressed by her observation. "Old injury. Broke my right leg as a boy. Never did heal quite right." He secured his horse and joined her on the steps. "How are you feeling today?" "Better." She flexed her arm carefully. "The burns no longer weep. Mrs. Reynolds says I am healing well." Elijah nodded, gathering his courage for what came next. "Nashoba, there's something you should know. The men who attacked your camp, they've been spotted nearby." She went still, fear and rage battling in her expression. "How many?" "Dozen or so. They're tracking Comanche movements north." "Then I must leave," she said decisively, starting to rise. "I bring danger to your door." Elijah caught her arm gently. "You're not fully healed, and you can't outrun them alone. What choice do I have?" Her eyes flashed. "Wait for them to find me here. To burn this place as they burned my camp?" "I can take you north," he said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke. "Get you to your people safely." Nashoba stared at him, searching his face for deception. "Why would you do this? You are a ranger. Your duty is here." "Some duties go beyond a badge," he replied simply. That night, as they prepared for their journey, Elijah penned a letter to Captain Williams explaining his absence. He didn't expect understanding, but he couldn't leave without word. His career as a ranger might be over after this, but he found surprisingly that the thought bothered him less than it should have. "We leave before dawn," he told Nashoba as he packed provisions. "Travel by night when we can. Less chance of being spotted that way." She nodded, packing the few belongings she'd accumulated. A dress Mrs. Reynolds had provided, some healing salves, a knife Elijah had given her for protection. Her movements were methodical, practiced. "You've done this before," he observed. "Left in a hurry. Many times." Her hands stilled. "My people have been pushed from one place to another for generations. We learn to carry little, leave quickly." Elijah felt a familiar shame at what his kind had done to hers. "I'm sorry. You did not hold the torch that burned my camp," she said, resuming her packing. "Or sign the papers that stole our land." "No, but I wear the same star as men who did." Nashoba looked at him then, truly looked at him. "Why did you become a ranger, Elijah Morgan?" The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him that in years. "Wanted to make a difference, I suppose. Protect people who couldn't protect themselves." He gave a humorless laugh. "Sounds foolish saying it out loud." "It is not foolish to want justice," she said quietly. "Only to believe it comes from a star on your chest." Her words hit home harder than she could know. Elijah had joined the Rangers with ideals intact, only to watch them erode as politics and prejudice dictated policy more often than actual justice. As night fell, they ate their last meal in the cabin, a simple stew that simmered over the fire. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on Elijah. In another life, another world, perhaps. He shook the thought away. Such thinking led nowhere. "Tell me about your people," he said instead. "Where we're headed." Nashoba's expression softened. "My mother's band camps near the Palo Duro Canyon now. Not many of us left." She traced patterns in her stew. "The young men want to fight. The elders counsel patience. Both paths lead to the same end, I fear." "Which path would you choose?" She considered the question carefully. "I would choose to live, not just survive." Her eyes met his. "There is a difference." Before Elijah could respond, a sound outside froze them both. Horses approaching, multiple riders. "Get down," he whispered, extinguishing the lamp. He moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 5 riders, maybe more in the shadows. The moonlight glinted off a familiar badge on the lead rider's chest. "Rangers?" Nashoba asked, crouched near the fireplace. Elijah shook his head. "Not all of them." He recognized Thomas Weber among the riders, a local rancher whose hatred of natives was well known throughout the county. "Stay here, don't make a sound." He stepped onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind him. The riders halted, their horses stamping nervously in the darkness. "Evening, gentlemen," Elijah called, his hand resting casually near his holstered gun. "What brings the Rangers to my property at this hour?" Captain Williams dismounted, his weathered face grim in the moonlight. "Got reports you're harboring a Comanche woman, Morgan. Need to bring her in for questioning." Questioning about what? Elijah asked, maintaining his casual stance despite the tension coursing through him. Raid on the Webster farm last month, Williams replied. 3 dead, including a child. Witnesses say Comanche riders were responsible. The woman inside was nowhere near the Webster place, Elijah said evenly. She was with her own camp south of here, a camp that was attacked and burned by militia 2 weeks ago. Weber spat onto the ground. All due respect, Captain, we don't need to stand here debating. The law's clear about harboring hostiles. She's not hostile, Elijah snapped. She's injured. Recovering from burns she received when her people were massacred. William studied him, something like pity in his eyes. I know you've had a hard time since Sarah passed, son, but this isn't the way to fill that emptiness. The words stung more than Elijah cared to admit. This has nothing to do with Sarah, doesn't it? Williams dismounted, approaching slowly. Look, bring her out peacefully. We'll take her to Fort Griffin, make sure she gets fair treatment. Elijah had seen the fair treatment natives received at the forts. I can't do that, Captain. A tense silence fell over the group. The other rangers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the confrontation building. Don't make me arrest you, Morgan, Williams said quietly. Badge or no, you're obstructing justice. Before Elijah could respond, the cabin door opened. Neshoba stepped out, head held high despite the fear she must have felt facing 5 armed men. I will go with you, she said clearly. Elijah Morgan is not your enemy. No, Elijah protested, moving between her and the rangers. They can't guarantee your safety. And you cannot guarantee yours if you continue this way, she replied softly. To Williams, she said, I know nothing of any raid on a farm. I was with my husband's band until they were killed. Williams gestured to one of his men. Simmons, take her. As Ranger Simmons approached, something changed in the atmosphere. Weber's hand moved to his gun. It ain't right letting her talk like she's innocent. My cousin's boy was on that farm. Everything happened at once. Weber drew his pistol. Elijah shoved Neshoba back toward the cabin door. A shot cracked through the night air. Pain exploded in Elijah's shoulder as he fell to his knees. Through the haze, he saw Williams wrestling Weber to the ground, heard shouting, the frightened whinny of horses. Then Neshoba was beside him, pressing something against his wound, her face the last thing he saw before darkness took him. Elijah woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the scent of coffee brewing nearby. He blinked, disoriented, trying to piece together where he was and how he'd gotten there. His shoulder throbbed beneath clean bandages. The prodigal ranger awakens, came a familiar voice. He turned his head carefully to see Sheriff Blackwood sitting in a chair beside the bed, nursing a cup of coffee. The room around them was sparse but clean. The doctor's back room, Elijah realized. Neshoba? He asked, his voice rough with disuse. Blackwood's expression gave nothing away. The Comanche woman. She's safe. For now. Relief flooded through Elijah. What happened after I was shot? All hell broke loose is what happened, Blackwood replied, setting his cup aside. Weber's been arrested. Captain Williams personally escorted him to the county jail in El Paso. He leaned forward. You've been out for 3 days, Morgan. Doc wasn't sure you'd pull through at first. Bullet nicked an artery. Elijah attempted to sit up, wincing at the pain. Where is she? Easy now, Blackwood cautioned, helping adjust his pillows. She's at my house. My wife's watching over her. At Elijah's surprised look, he shrugged. Figured it was the safest place given the circumstances. Not everyone in town shares Weber's sentiments. I need to see her, Elijah insisted, already calculating how soon he could travel. You need to rest, Blackwood countered firmly. Doctor's orders. Besides, there's something you should know. He hesitated. The militia that attacked her camp? They hit another settlement 2 days ago. Killed everyone except a few children they took with them. Cold dread settled in Elijah's stomach. Where? 30 miles north of here. They're getting bolder. Blackwood stood, moving to the window. Captain Williams has requested reinforcements from Fort Griffin, but they're stretched thin as it is. Elijah closed his eyes, the implications clear. As long as the militia operated in the territory, Neshoba wouldn't be safe. I need to get her to her people. You need to heal first, came a new voice from the doorway. Neshoba stood there. A shawl wrapped around her shoulders despite the summer heat. Her burns had healed considerably, leaving scars that would always mark her, but did nothing to diminish the quiet strength in her bearing. Blackwood nodded to them both. I'll leave you two to talk. Morgan, remember what the doctor said, no exertion for at least another week. After the sheriff departed, Neshoba approached the bed cautiously, as if uncertain of her welcome. You should not have stepped in front of that gun. Wasn't exactly a calculated decision, Elijah admitted with a weak smile. How are you holding up? I should be asking you that question. She sat in the chair Blackwood had vacated. Mrs. Reynolds says you lost much blood. An awkward silence fell between them, filled with words neither knew how to say. Finally, Elijah spoke. I'm sorry about your people. The second attack. Neshoba nodded, grief etching new lines around her eyes. Sheriff Blackwood told me, it is as I feared, they hunt us to the last. We'll find a way to get you safely to your mother's band, Elijah promised, as soon as I can ride. She studied him, something unreadable in her expression. Why do you care so much what happens to me, Elijah Morgan? I am nothing to you, just another native in a territory full of us. The question deserved an honest answer. When I found you in that camp, something changed. I'd been existing, not living, going through motions. He met her gaze steadily. You reminded me there's still good worth fighting for in this world. Neshoba's composure wavered slightly. And if I told you, I do not wish to rejoin my mother's band, that I have been thinking of a different path? What path? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. There is a settlement north of here. Mixed bloods, whites who married natives, others who belong nowhere else. They live in peace, trade with both worlds. She hesitated. A woman there teaches children, both white and native. Perhaps I could do something similar. The hope in her voice touched something in Elijah that had been dormant for too long. Is that what you want? I want... She paused, collecting her thoughts. I want to build something instead of watching things burn, to help children see beyond the divisions of our peoples. Her hand unconsciously touched the scars on her face. But perhaps it is a foolish dream. It's not foolish, Elijah said firmly. Not at all. Over the next 2 weeks, as Elijah regained his strength, Redemption Springs experienced a subtle shift. The story of Weber's attack and Neshoba's dignity in the face of false accusations had changed some minds. Not all prejudice ran too deep for that, but enough that when she walked down the main street with Mrs. Blackwood, fewer hostile stares followed her. Captain Williams returned, bringing news that the militia had been tracked to a camp near the Red River. A combined force of Rangers and Army cavalry had engaged them, resulting in several arrests and the rescue of the captured children. The territory should be safer now, he told Elijah during a visit to check on his recovery. Not completely, but better than it was. As for Elijah's future with the Rangers, Williams was surprisingly understanding. You did what you thought was right, Morgan. Can't fault a man for following his conscience, even if his methods were questionable. He offered his hand. Your badge is waiting when you're ready. But as the day approached when Elijah would be strong enough to travel, he found himself increasingly uncertain about returning to his former life. The emptiness that had driven him to reckless patrols and solitary existence had been filled with something new. Purpose, yes, but also connection. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, he found Neshoba on the porch of Blackwood's house, watching the horizon. Doc says I can travel by next week, he said, leaning against the railing beside her. I've been thinking about that settlement you mentioned. She turned to him, surprise evident in her eyes. You would go there. Might be a good place for a fresh start, he said carefully. For both of us. If you wanted company on the journey, that is. Neshoba studied him, searching for uncertainty or pity and finding neither. And your life here, your duty as a ranger. Some duties matter more than others, Elijah replied simply. I joined the Rangers to make a difference. Maybe there are other ways to do that. A smile slowly spread across her face, the first true smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her features, scars and all, into something beautiful. I would welcome your company, Elijah Morgan. He reached out hesitantly, offering his hand. After a moment's pause, she took it, her fingers warm against his. Neither of them spoke of love or forever. Such promises seemed premature, possibly foolish given all they'd endured and all that lay ahead. But as they stood together, watching the sun sink below the Texas horizon, Elijah felt something he'd thought lost forever. Hope, taking root in fertile ground once scorched by grief. They were two wounded souls who had found in each other not completion, but the courage to begin again. And for now, that was enough. As twilight deepened around them, Neshoba squeezed his hand gently. My people have a saying, The strongest trees grow where the wind is fiercest. Elijah nodded, understanding the truth of those words as he never had before. Then I reckon we must be growing stronger every day. Together, they watched the first stars appear, neither rushing to break the peaceful moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new beginnings, but tonight they stood on the threshold of possibility, two survivors who had discovered that even after the most devastating fires, new life could emerge from the ashes.